Okay, my name is Steve Allen. I was the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New Brunswick from 2013 to 2015. And I began my journey in Freemasonry in Westmoreland Lodge in Port Elgin in 1980. And at that time, I was married. And when I joined Westmoreland Lodge in 1980, I was married. And I had 2 children. They were only 2 and 3 years old. So it makes it a little bit difficult being a new master mason and having a couple of children at home. But my wife was very understanding, and certainly we got along with that, and actually had a 3rd child added to the family. And that my 3rd child is actually a Mason and a master, eventually became the master of Westmoreland Lodge. So I'll divulge a little more information about that as we get farther along. And certainly when I first joined Masonry, there were 3 people that had a big influence on me joining Masonry, and certainly their influence held my attention for a number of years. And those 3 people were Rod Johnson, Dud Cole, and Dr. Harold Hedvigton. They were very prominent members of the fraternity at that time in Port Elgin, and that was part of the reason why I decided to join. I thought of them, as well as I knew those men, and certainly got to know them better as I became more active in Masonry. But those men were very prominent people in this community, and I thought if those people belong to this fraternity, maybe I'd better join. So, and I had the fortune of joining with my brother Dan Allen, and myself joined both together and took our work together, and we stood at the altar, west of the altar, and delivered our examinations and obligation together. So it was a very good time in Masonry. Now, I did have 2 other brothers that joined the fraternity, but Dan and I joined in 1980. So, when I was Grand Master, there was a number of people that traveled with me, and I traveled with them approaching my time to become Grand Master. And those people were Miles Graham, and certainly Peter Whitaker was the Grand Master just before I became Grand Master. And so the other people were Clyde Towns. He was active at that time, and Don Steves, as well as a number of other people in the fraternity. But one of the persons that was with me from the time I became Deputy Grand Master was Buddy Trenham. Buddy Trenham was he was the Assistant Grand Director of Ceremonies when I was the Deputy Grand Master, which is typically the way that it should flow. And when I became Grand Master, Buddy was ready for the role. He became the Grand Director of Ceremonies, and he and I traveled many miles together. There were certainly many other brethren from the Port Elgin area too, as well, and in the Moncton area that traveled. Bob Wilson was one that was traveled often with us, and my brother Dale somewhat, depending on where we were going and what was going on. But the person, like I said, that traveled the most with me was Buddy Trenham, and he did an excellent job as my Grand Director of Ceremonies. So, could I pause? I'd like to pause for a moment. I got to get my thoughts in. One thing that took place before I became Grand Master, several years before I became Grand Master, was that the fraternity made the decision to print out the ritual. The ritual used to be coded, and that's why I remember some of these other brothers like Rod Johnson and Dud Cole and them, because they were great people to help us when we were learning our ritual in code. But once they wrote the code, took the code out of the ritual and wrote it out, I felt that at that time that was unfortunate. I'll put it that way. I won't say it was a mistake, because the powers that be made it happen, and I won't say it was a mistake, but I felt it was very unfortunate because we lost a lot when that happened, because at that time, what better relationship could you develop than a brother who was willing to sit for hours with you and help you to learn your ritual? And once they wrote it out, we lost that. That didn't happen anymore. And I can think, like I said, I remember my brother Dan and I meeting with Rod Johnson and some of the older members of the fraternity and spending some time learning ritual, and the relationship that you develop, it's lifetime. You'll remember that all of your life. If they pass you the book now when it's all written out and you go study it at home somewhere or in your bathroom or bedroom or wherever you study it, it's not the same as having that real personal contact. So I felt that we lost something there that we never really got back. So I believe that's, and I believe even today that it has an effect on. And at that time they said, well, they did it because there was a lot of people traveling and they would be stuck in a motel room somewhere, and if they didn't have it out and written out, they wouldn't be able to study it. But I said, what if you were in a strange place and you contacted a Mason from that area and he was willing to come and help? Do you not think the relationship that you would have developed at that time would have been life learning and life remembering it would just be incredible, that experience that you would have. And how would that Mason feel if he got a call from a Mason from Port Elgin and he's in Toronto or somewhere and he's going to study his ritual with him? Or, to me, I felt that was a loss to the fraternity. So moving forward, after I became the Grand Master, my deputy Grand Master at that time was Clyde Towns. He was followed, and as I said earlier in the interview, we met and traveled on many occasions, and as we went up through. And my Grand Secretary at that time was Randall Nelson, who actually both of these brothers, Randall Nelson and Clyde Towns, went on to become Grand Masters in time. So it was a great network to be working with. So some of the other officers who were great in supporting me were my 7 district deputies. I had 7 district deputies, and I still believe today that I had the best district deputies that any Grand Master ever had. And to preface that, I would also say, when it came time and we were leaving the office, the Deputy Grand Masters had served their time, 5 out of a possible 6 of my district deputies put their name in to run for Grand Lodge offices. Never before that had ever happened. Now, one of them was in an off year, so he wasn't eligible. So there was 5 out of 6. There was 6 that were eligible to because they were coming out as Deputy Grand Masters, to our District Deputy Grand Masters, to go on, and they all, 5 out of the 6 put their name in, and it created a little bit of a problem at Grand Lodge because at that time we used to count the ballot, and the district deputies were to assist somebody who was appointed as the head scrutineer. And when it come time to count the ballot, all the district deputies were already in on the ballot, so they weren't allowed to go count. So they had to grab another Mason or two to go with them to help count because the district deputies names were on the ballot. So I in my time I'd never seen it, and I don't think many others would have, but I was so proud that my district deputies were that interested in Grand Lodge that they actually put their name in for different offices, and a number of them were successful. So anyways, I was pretty pleased with that. So some of the things that happened when I was Grand Master, one of the things that is still active today that I was very pleased was we started our interprovincial. The interprovincial day started at that time when I was Grand Master, halfway through my term, and had it not been for COVID, we would have been continually running the interprovincial day, but as it turns out, at this particular time, we are resurrecting the interprovincial. It ran successfully for 7 years. We lost 3, or this would be the 4th year but this year it's being started back up again, and interprovincial day will be held in Moncton, and I hope it runs for a number of years to come, and that's in interaction with our neighboring jurisdictions of Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia. And we gather one day on the 4th Saturday of September, and for interprovincial day we have with the hosting lodge, we use their ritual to open. we have one of the visiting lodges puts on the Masonic education, and the lodge that closes in their ritual. And whichever province we're in, that's the way the format follows, and it's I'm very pleased about that. So the other thing that I'm very, very proud of is the fact that I have been honored by 3 of the grand jurisdictions in the area by making me an honorary past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Nova Scotia. I'm an honorary member of the Grand Lodge of Prince Edward Island, and I'm an honorary member of the Grand Lodge of Quebec. And I've been presented medallions from all 3 of those jurisdictions, and I wear them proudly whenever I go. So some people say, you've got some and I often explain, if they ask, I would explain why they're there, and I certainly wouldn't wear one and not the other. So I'm wearing those medallions to represent the jurisdictions that honored me when I was the Grand Master. So the other thing that happened when I was the Grand Master, I made a visitation to the Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario. And I was the serving Grand Master, and I was asked to make a presentation at the Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario on behalf of all of the jurisdictions in Canada, because it's such a large event that you couldn't have all of them speaking, and there's a number of jurisdictions represented there from the US as well. So one person is selected from the US, and one person is selected from Canada to represent the jurisdictions, and I was asked, and there was probably 800 or 900 Masons there in the meeting at the Royal York in Ontario, in Toronto, and anyways, and I got quite a laugh from. I started my presentation, and my theme was size doesn't matter, and when I started that presentation and said size doesn't matter, I was referring to the jurisdictions, and that we all face a number of the same issues. But when I said size doesn't matter, I also qualified that with that I had also, my wife was around when I was printing this up, and she said, you better make sure you make it clear to them that some of the men may agree with that, but not all of the women necessarily agree with that. So I got the crowd loosened up, and they laughed, and I had a number of brothers speak to me afterwards, and they thought that was a great start. And then we went on anyway to discuss some of the issues, or I presented a presentation on the issues that we face in small jurisdictions that they do too as well, having like lack of attendance at their meetings and so on and so forth, and what to provide and do. It doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. In Ontario, they have thousands and thousands more Masons than we do, but they face a lot of the same issues. So, and other jurisdictions as well. So anyways, that was 2 or 3 things that I really was pleased with. And the last thing that I did in my term of office was I began what I called Masonic renewal. And Buddy Trenum was with me, and we attended and made my official visitations to all of the lodges at that time. And I had planned. Can I pause for a moment? So in this presentation that I did as my official visits, I went around to the lodges, and after we got our meeting going and so forth, I proposed 2 questions to the brethren that were present. One was, what do you believe would be the biggest issues facing the fraternity today? And the second question was, what do you feel that Grand Lodge could do to help? And I presented those 2 questions to the brethren present, and I then called the craft from labor to refreshment, gave the brethren the opportunity to discuss these 2 questions amongst themselves, and the brave ones who were willing to speak, afterwards we called the craft back from refreshment to labor again, and I asked the brethren to respond. And Buddy Trenum was there with a pen and paper in hand, and he wrote down every response. And I was told afterwards on several occasions that there was brethren that stood up and spoke about those 2 questions that had been sitting in lodge for years and never spoke publicly for years in the lodge, but that was enough to motivate them, and we had generated a great deal of discussion and gathered a lot of information from a lot of the lodges within the province. And after I had got that done, I was near the end of my time, I actually formed a committee then that met on several occasions, actually in Fredericton, and I had a number of people on that committee, and we were going through the notes and trying to categorize the different responses and so on. We got that all put together, and it was the end of my term. So I passed that on to the powers that be, but it's unfortunate because there was a lot of good information there, and there was a lot of brethren that were hoping that their responses were going to generate something, and it's unfortunate that it got left by the wayside. But I only had the 2 years, so that was over. So, anyways, those are some of the things that took place as a Grand Master that I'm very proud and pleased with, and that we did. And I can't say enough about the support of the brethren. Also from my mother lodge, Westmoreland, there was a number of brothers traveled with me on many occasions and went on my official visits and so on, and certainly had a great deal of support from my own mother lodge as well. And one of the things that happened when I was the Grand Master, and it just was coincidental, it wasn't planned and wasn't set up, but I made my official visit to Westmoreland Lodge. And when I made my official visit to Westmoreland Lodge, the master of the lodge that year was my son, Norman Allen. And when I made the official visit to Westmoreland Lodge, I was greeted by my son and escorted to the east. And to my knowledge, I asked the Grand Historian at that time to check back and see if he could ever find any place where there was a Grand Master made an official visit to his mother lodge, and his son was the sitting master at the time. He couldn't find anything that ever showed that had happened. So I was pretty pleased and proud about that as well. So anyways, I would like to say certainly that the one thing that I would really like to emphasize, that I think that we need to really place more emphasis on, is that we so often are in search of new members to join this fraternity. And so often I have lodges that have 50, 60, 70 members, and at their meetings there's 15, 20 members present. Where's the other 40 or 50? We need new members, but we need to take care of the ones that we already have. And if we would put a little more emphasis into that, I think it would help, to strengthen our lodges and strengthen our fraternity. Because these people that are already members, they were interested one time, they joined the lodge. Don't let them slip away, brothers. Try to make contact with those brothers. Try your best to get them. And I know it's difficult, but I think that if we put a little more emphasis on the members we already have, it would strengthen our fraternity. And for my final summation, I would like to certainly wish all the best to our officers that are in place now, our Grand Masters and his officers, and I'm more than willing to help, aid, and assist and support any of those brothers. I'm just a phone call away. Thank you.